Hey guys, Constance here. Welcome back to A Good Life Farm. So today I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm doing a recipe which is not different. However, this is part of a collaboration series. All through the month of September, there is a collaboration that's taking place called Souptember. And as the name probably indicates, it's all soup recipes. This was organized by the Beals, and there is a whole bunch of channels that are participating in this collaboration, and I will be doing 2 of them for this series, this video today, as well as another one later on in the month. But there is a playlist of all of the videos that will be compiled together, and you can kind of follow along. And be sure to, subscribe to the channels and see what is being posted, what is being shared, and get to know some other great YouTubers. So the recipe that I'm sharing today is for a soup that I've actually kind of shared here and there in the past. However, I've never done a dedicated video for it. So this is Cabbage Roll Soup. It's all of the great flavor of the classic dish cabbage rolls, except there's no having to break apart delicate leaves and any of that mess. You just combine it all in a Dutch oven, a soup pot, let it all cook, and just enjoy it. So now if you are brand new here and you are just finding my channel, maybe through this collaboration, my name is Constance. My husband and I are homesteaders here in northern Alabama. I share at least 3 videos every week on homesteading, home cooking, and back to basics. I do occasional devotional videos. I do garden tours throughout the summer and all sorts of good stuff like that. I'm also a blogger. I have been a blogger for many years at Cosmopolitan However, at the end of this year, I will be rebranding that to match my channel here, and it will become agoodlifefarm.com, which right now that URL already goes to the website. So all you have to remember is A Good Life Farm, and you'll get there. So to get started with this recipe, I'm going to need some ground beef, some onions, some peppers, some beef broth, and some seasonings and all that good stuff. So let us get started. So I've got 1 pound of ground beef in my Dutch oven here, and I'm going to dice up an onion and then a red and green bell pepper. I'm just going to toss these into the pot as I get them diced up. Alright, so while my ground beef and peppers and onion are all cooking together here, I'm going to go ahead and slice up my cabbage. Now for this recipe, you're really only going to need about 1/2 of a head of your typical cabbage. If you're using a really tiny head of cabbage, you could probably use the whole thing, but I'm just going to go ahead and use 1/2 of it. And I'm just going to slice this up. My preference is to kind of slice it fairly thin because I just don't like humongous chunks of cabbage, but that's my preference. I just go ahead and slice the wedges, and then I don't want to have massive pieces of cabbage that I'm trying to get on my spoon while I'm eating this soup. So after I cut, a wedge into the slices, I go ahead and kind of chop all of those slices in half, just to make them a little more manageable when I'm trying to eat my soup. Okay, now I know this looks like a lot of cabbage for this soup, but cabbage cooks down quite a bit, and so after it goes into the pot, it will really wilt down and shrink in size, and so this will look like a much more manageable or reasonable quantity once it gets into the pot. Alright, so my ground beef and everything is nice and cooked. Now I'm using a very lean ground beef, so I don't have any drippings to drain off or anything like that. But of course, if you've got a lot of grease in your pot, you would probably want to drain that out or sop it up with a paper towel or however you remove your drippings. So next I'm going to add in a few other things. I've got 1 can of tomato sauce, and if you were using a homemade tomato sauce, you would just use a pint. I'm going to add in 4 cups of beef broth, Next, I'm going to add in 2 bay leaves, and my bay leaves are a little broken up, so I may have to use a few pieces. If you've got broken bay leaves, you just kind of eyeball 2 leaves, but then just remember how many pieces you put in all together. I think that'll work. Next, I'm going to add in some seasonings. I've got parsley, hot paprika, onion powder, and dill. Now, occasionally people have difficulty finding hot paprika. If you cannot find hot paprika in your area, that's quite all right. This recipe calls for a teaspoon of hot paprika. So if you couldn't find it, you would just use a teaspoon of regular paprika, and then I would add in between 1/4 teaspoon to 1/2 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. It just depends upon how much heat you like. If you don't like a lot of heat at all, you might just use a pinch or 2. But that is a simple substitution if you can't find it. So I'm adding a teaspoon each of the hot paprika. I'm adding in the onion powder, a teaspoon of dill, and a teaspoon of parsley. Alright, and then the last thing I'm going to add in is a tablespoon of honey, just for a little bit of sweetness. Now, you don't have to include this. If you are avoiding any kind of sugars or anything like that, you can certainly omit this, but I just like that little touch of sweet that goes in this soup. I'm just going to stir this together. I'm going to bring it up to a boil, then I'll reduce it down to a simmer and let it simmer for about 10 to 15 minutes, just to kind of let all of the flavors work together in the soup. All right, so my soup has been cooking here. And so now I'm just gonna fish out my bay leaves. And I remember I put 4 pieces in there. So got 1. 2, 3. I got 1 more piece in here somewhere. There it is. 4. I just realized that when I was putting in all my seasonings earlier, I forgot to add the salt and pepper. So about 1/2 teaspoon each of salt and pepper. All right. So now finally we're going to go ahead and we're going to add in our cabbage. We'll just kind of stir this in, and then I'll put the lid back on the pot here, and I'll let this cook for about 5 to 10 minutes, or until the cabbage is nice and tender. And while my soup has been cooking, I actually also went ahead and I started some rice in my rice cooker. Now that is totally optional. You don't have to use rice if you don't want to. You could also use cauliflower rice. But if you think about cabbage rolls, they have rice in the filling generally. And so after the soup has all finished cooking and we ladle it into bowls, I just top it with a scoop of rice. And so that is how I finish it off. So we'll let that finish up with the cabbage, and I'll see you in a few minutes. Alright you guys, so that is how you make the cabbage roll soup. It was a really easy recipe, and you know, if you like cabbage rolls but you don't like the work that goes into them, this is a great way to get that flavor without all of that difficulty in rolling the cabbage leaves. So this is just a favorite soup recipe that I enjoy making. As you saw, it was pretty easy and filled with good things like lots of bell peppers and cabbage and that little bit of rice on top to finish it off. It's just a great all-around soup recipe. So if you would like to give this recipe a try, I have a printable version of it on my website, and I will put a link to it down below underneath the video if you're watching this on YouTube. And over on my website, I've actually got hundreds of other recipes and all sorts of great articles for you to browse through. And if you're not already signed up, please feel free to sign up for my free email newsletter that keeps you up to date on everything that is taking place here at the homestead, whether it is new recipes on my website or new videos here on the channel. So thanks for joining me here again in the Homestead Kitchen. Be sure to check out all of the other channels that are taking part in this collaboration. There's going to be a lot of great soup recipes. So that is it for today. Thanks for joining me here at A Good Life Farm. I will talk to y'all next time.